What's going on, guys? In this video, I want to talk about why, or I guess potentially what Donald Trump's most insane idea is. And it's something that he just mentioned, I believe, a couple days ago during his presidential announcement. I might be wrong on where he did this, but I just saw a clip of that. I saw some of the presidential announcement, not the whole thing, so I don't know if it was from that. But I do know this. He has announced that he wants to put, if he becomes president again, his words, every drug dealer in jail for life, prison for life. And to me, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but to me that seems like the most batshit crazy thing even he has ever said. And look, let me be clear on my position of this, right? Like, I don't hate Donald Trump like a lot of people. I was a fan of Donald Trump's when I'm 35 now. I believe I was like 20 years old, and I was like reading his book, a couple of his books I read, and they really helped me to just get some motivation and just sort of a thought of how to go about business and just being an entrepreneur and things like that. So when he became president, I was not following politics at all, and I saw that like all my friends assumed that I was a huge Trump supporter because they knew I was a fan of his, and so I didn't really start paying any attention until the whole thing with the virus and all that popped up. Really, like maybe a little bit before, but anyways, my position on him is I don't hate him. I'm not one of these people that just has the Trump derangement syndrome. I really mostly I like him personally. I don't think he's a racist. I think he gets a bad rep on all that kind of stuff. But his love for the jab, his and this thing here, really those are the two main things that I have a real problem with. And there's also the bill he passed, I can't think of the name of it, the like anti-Semitic bill or whatever it was. That one was a little uncomfortable for me, but we're not going to get into that. Point is, mostly I don't mind Trump at all. But this, every drug dealer in prison for life, does that mean like the dude, 19-year-old college kid selling an eighth of weed like out of his apartment? I don't think that does mean that. But right now, marijuana is illegal under federal law. I mean, you give the government an inch and they'll take a mile, right? Like you tell the government that, hey, from now on, we can literally put that college kid selling an eighth of weed in prison for life. That's an appealing thing for the government to hear, right? That's a thing where the government looks at that and says, well, hey, now we can devote more of those resources towards weed dealers. Because a lot of times with weed, in my experience at least, like, weed dealers don't have, the federal government doesn't really care about them mostly, because if you get caught for selling even hundreds of pounds of weed, you might go to federal prison for like a year, 2 years max. I know someone that was caught with 300 pounds of weed, and when they caught him, it had nothing to do with the weed. They caught him because like he was tied up in some other case having to do with something more serious, I believe. And so when they didn't even prosecute him for the weed, they just gave him like almost 10 years for whatever else he had done or whatever. I don't know. But the point is, they just took the weed and didn't even charge him, right? So this would change everything if you were allowed to put those types of people in prison for life. And by the way, if any weed dealer were to go to prison for life, there's a decent to better than average chance they've been almost completely nonviolent their entire life. You know what I mean? At least in the sense of like, weed deals, most of them don't end in violence. So regardless of it, let's just say let's go even further, right? Let's say it wasn't weed. Weed dealers would be fine. Low-level dealers would be fine. And let's say it's just like these big fentanyl dealers that are bringing it from other countries and things of that nature, right? And a lot of the conservative argument on that is, hey, these people are killing our kids. Dude, firstly, if your kids are doing fentanyl And I understand addictions happen. I said in a previous video, I think two of my very best friends when I was younger died from drug overdoses, heroin, I believe. And these guys were best friends with me until the day they died. And another one of my friends didn't die, but he is basically, it ruined his life. He's like methadone forever. You know, I don't know if you guys know anything about that. It's terrible. But, so this is not coming from an insensitive place. But if your kids are doing drugs, like my friends were spoiled for the most part. Their parents either spoiled them beyond belief, or they weren't tough enough on them. They didn't parent them maybe to the best of their abilities, right? And maybe they thought they were doing the best. I don't think they had bad parents at all. But the point is, you know, I think that the vast majority of those situations come from parenting, not being real with your kids, thinking that your kids can't get into these drugs because they're your kids and they're just like, that wouldn't happen. That's all. You got to be raw with your kids. Like my son, when he gets a little bit older, he's not quite of that age for me to start talking about that kind of stuff yet. But I'm definitely going to be completely honest in a sort of a raw way about that. But my overall point on this is, like, fentanyl is not coming into your neighborhood and killing your kids. People are bringing it in, sure, but they're bringing it in because there is a demand for it, right? Meaning your kids want it. And if it wasn't brought into your neighborhood and your kids were into opiates of that at that level, they would. Sorry, I think there was a dog walking by. If they weren't, your kids would be going to get it. That's my point, right? Like, you're not going to end all the drug dealers. If that's the goal, like that's crazy. You know, you're just going to put people in some cases, at least, in prison for life that aren't even doing anything that's not a consensual activity. I'm not saying you have to like drug dealers, right? I'm not a fan of people that sell fentanyl and large or heroin or whatever the hell it might be, right? I'm not a fan of them. But to say you're going to throw them in prison for life, and he didn't specify just the top level guys, he just said drug dealers, is to me one of the most bonkers things anyone has ever said. And something that I'm completely opposed to. My overall belief in terms of, like, you know, how the government should operate in prosecuting criminals is that you should not be putting people in prison that aren't either violent, and that's really the main thing, or theft. Like, I think that if they're breaking into people's houses and things of that nature, that they need to go to jail, right? And I mean, when I say violence, I do include, like, things that you would probably assume, meaning like rape, of course, pedophilia absolutely goes in that category for me. And, you know, there's some things that would go into that category. Maybe there's another thing or two. But the point is, I do not support drug dealers going to prison. If I had it my way, I would probably say, let's just legalize everything. And because, look, at the end of the day, the vast majority of people you and I know, if they want to do drugs, they're going to do them. If, like, for example, if they legalize every drug right now, I would not be going to the store to buy drugs. Would usage of those drugs or drugs in general increase if it were legal? Yeah, probably. You know, I mean, I would imagine so. But you're telling me, okay, that you are going to put all illegal drug dealers in prison for life. Meanwhile, Big Pharma's killing people. And that's just a fact, right? Even if you don't talk about the most recent product, if you look at it from the standpoint of, I mean, Oxycontin, right? That's a killer. You see Jordan Peterson's battle with, I don't know, I guess it was Xanax or something of that nature, barbiturate. You see what that can do. There are overdoses every day from prescription pills, but those pharmaceutical companies are just fine, like no big deal. You know, we let them continue to kill our youth, as you say. And again, my standpoint on that is the same. I think that it's the parents' responsibility to make sure their kids don't get into drugs, right? Say what you will about Donald Trump. None of his kids, to my knowledge, have had any drug issues like that of, our president right now. But in any case, I think that it's definitely on parents to keep your kids away from drugs. I think that it's, regardless of what you think of drug dealers, for consensual activities, as long as there's no violence. Now, if these drug dealers, these hop-end drug dealers especially, are committing violent crimes, that's what they need to go to jail for. Get them off the streets. They'd have no reason to be running around. If they're doing, anything of that nature, like I said, pedophilia, all that kind of stuff, put them in jail. That's all, to me, goes under the category of violence. But I think that Trump, in many ways, is going to lose a lot of potential would-be voters if he keeps on with that whole idea of let's put all drug dealers in prison for life. Because, I just don't think the average person will agree with that. Maybe I'm wrong, because it was met with cheers when he said it. But if you're at a Trump speech or rally, whatever it was, and he says that, most of those people are probably just going to cheer whatever he says, because he does have this sort of cult-like fan base for the most extreme ones, right? Like, it doesn't matter. They all hate the vaccine, but when Trump says it, they basically just don't really cheer when he praises it, and then they just basically ignore that and then cheer the next thing he says. So I think that's kind of crazy. But I don't know, let me know what you guys think. Throwing every drug dealer in prison. And let's just say, again, comment, not on the low level guys, because I think we can all agree on that. But let me know if you think that people that are even big time drug dealers that are non-violent should go to prison for their entire lives. Let me know. I'll talk to you guys later.